Welcome to the Elevate Your Leadership podcast series with U.S. Navy Special Operations veteran, CEO, and hockey fanatic Bob Pizzini. Bob discusses leadership, success, failure, defining moments, and hard lessons learned with guests who are intentional in their approach to leadership. Leadership is a perishable skill. Use it or lose it. In this series, entrepreneurs, industry executives, academics, public figures, and other highly effective professionals share their formulas for success with you.
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Elevate Your Leadership podcast with me, your host, Bob Pizzini. If you've watched this podcast before or listened on any of the podcast channels that are out there, you know that I like to have discussions with people who not only have brought great value to me and my organization, but these are people that I know personally, that I've spoken to before, and these are people that I know through the discussion that we're about to have will bring great value to you and your organization. Today's guest, a very special guest, Virginia's 71st governor, the Honorable Robert F. McDonnell. I'm going to read the governor's bio, and then we're going to get into an incredible discussion, which I'm going to break format today a little bit because normally I start with the origin story, a biographical sketch, and we are going to do that with the governor today, but we're going to start with the very unfortunate assassination attempt on President Trump over the weekend. But first, Governor McDonnell began his career in public office representing the 84th District in the Virginia House of Delegates, where he served 7 terms from 1991 to 2006. He was elected Virginia Attorney General in 2005 and was inaugurated January of 2006. In November 2009, he was elected the 71st governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia with the most votes of any candidate in history at the time, serving from 2010 to 2014. He also served 4.5 years of active duty in the United States Army and 16 years in the United States Army Reserves, retiring as a lieutenant colonel, that's commander for all you Navy folks out there, in 1997. After active military service, he worked for the Fortune 500 company American Hospital Supply Corporation as an operations manager. He began practicing law in 1990 as a Virginia Beach prosecutor and was later a partner with the law firm of Huff, Poole, and Mahoney. Currently, he teaches law and government at Regent University and also Liberty University as a distinguished professor. Additionally, he is a principal and founder of the McDonnell Group, a firm that focuses on consulting and business development. He has rejoined the Virginia Beach law firm Poole, Brook, Plumley, P.C. He is also a weekly contributor on Newsmax TV and also, I believe, monthly on AM 790 WNIS, and a member of the board of directors of Delta Star, Inc. Governor McDonnell has a Bachelor's of Business Administration in Management from the University of Notre Dame, a Master of Science in Business Administration from Boston University, and a J.D. Juris Doctor, I believe that is, and a Master, an M.A. Master of Arts from Regent University. He is the leader of the racial reconciliation group, Virginians for Reconciliation, and on the boards of the Hampton Roads Chamber of Commerce, of which I am the vice chair this year, and I'll be the regional board chair next year, Virginia Beach Sister Cities Association, and the Samaritan House Foundation. He has served in various political leadership roles as chairman of the National Republican Platform Committee and as chairman of both the Republican Attorneys General Association and the Republican Governors Association. He has 5 adult children and 8 grandchildren. Governor McDonnell, welcome to the Elevate Your Leadership podcast.
Hey, thanks, Bob. I really appreciate being on talking about one of my favorite subjects.
Yeah, well, leadership, this podcast is all things leadership. And as I said just a minute ago during the intro, I love to have discussions with people who have experience, have education, have training, people who I've talked to before, and you and I have spoke on several occasions. And I know that I took value from the discussion. And because of that, I want you to come to my podcast and have these discussions and share your knowledge and your wisdom and your experiences with the greater audience. So thank you so much.
Right. Thank you.
I normally start with what some people call an origin story, where you grew up and what your childhood was like. And we're gonna get there in just a minute. But given the fact that we had an attempted assassination on the former president of the United States and current Republican candidate for president, 2 days before the Republican National Convention. I mean, there's just so much to take in. It can be overwhelming to think about this. And what can you share? What are your thoughts initially regarding this assassination attempt?
Well, I think it's a sad commentary on the tone of discussion or dialogue in the body politic today. I had the pleasure of being in elected office for 22 years in Virginia, 38 overall in government service, but I haven't seen a time like this where the tone is so hyper-partisan, so vitriolic, with leaders in both parties saying, I'm 100% right, you're 100% wrong, and since we're so far apart, we can't compromise. The only thing we can do is destroy our opponents. Now, they mean politically, but there are people that hear that kind of tone and think it's a license to be able to win at all costs. And so I think both parties are to blame for some of it. But political violence is something we've had throughout our country. We've had several assassination attempts. The last one, of course, was Ronald Reagan, 42 years ago. But this one, what first strikes me is just the divine providence. I mean, it's, millimeters away from being a catastrophic event for the president.
That's right.
The very last minute tilting of his head literally saved his life. I mean, you can't really explain or fathom, how that happened.
Right.
Of course, there's obviously some security concerns about how do you get 300 feet away.
Yeah.
On an elevated rooftop from the president,
for sure.
President.
Yeah.
So there's those issues, but I think the broader commentary, and I'll be interested to see this week, the convention actually starts today with the president speaking Thursday in 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
But the broader commentary is really how do both parties exercise the leadership to make their points, to make the differences with their opponent, to paint their vision of America, but not doing it in such a way that might contribute to people who might start with a mental health problem or some imbalance, but might give them the idea that it's okay to go out there and commit violence. So we've seen way too much of it in the last couple of years, people using violent protests as opposed to the peaceful protests that have always been more effective than America, Martin Luther King.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
How do we rein that back in? It wasn't even like this 10 years ago when I left the governor's office. We had, I thought, a more civil debate. We disagreed pretty strongly, but there was nothing with the kind of rhetoric that we see today. So I'm hopeful that we hear in the Republican convention this week a kind of a turning down of the heat.
Yeah.
Some of the reports I've heard just in the last 24 hours, if President Trump intends to do that, I think it'll be a tremendous sign of leadership for the country. President Biden was somewhat conciliatory in his remarks. So I hope this is a wake-up call. This isn't just about winning for a party. This is about the future of the greatest country the world has ever known, and that's a big deal for leaders.
Yeah, I think people have to realize we're Americans first. Before we're Republican or Democrat, and even at the city level, with city council and some of the things, before you're D or you're R, you represent the city of Virginia Beach, and every vote, first and foremost, should be in the best interest of the city, not your party. And that's kind of bold leadership. On those lines of this attempted assassination, the Supreme Court decision regarding presidential acts, and I know you're very familiar with that because you went through a very similar process of being falsely accused, essentially. But do you think that decision had any influence on this potential shooter, or do you think that decision advanced the kind of anarchistic viewpoint that you were talking about earlier, this radicalization, I guess?
I don't see a connection. Of course, we may never really know. You have a 20-year-old loner who actually was, on his rifle team, I guess, at his schools. The initial profile fits a little bit of somebody that might do that. There certainly would maybe be some mental health issues involved. I think there almost has to be. People think that's okay.
For sure.
As opposed to the ballot box, et cetera, in America. I think it's too early to say that. There's going to be more information probably coming forward in coming days about whether there was a motivation, was there any notes, et cetera.
Yeah.
I think the Supreme Court decision certainly animated the election even more, and you've had rhetoric on both sides, nobody's above the law, which is exactly true, and which the Supreme Court said. But at the same time, Constitution, the language of the Constitution actually has to mean something. This is sort of a novel question that the court hasn't resolved before, even though some elements of it go back to Chief Justice John Marshall dealing with a complaint of President Jefferson about being subpoenaed. So it's not new in terms of some of the legal reasoning, but this particular one about how far that immunity goes and spelling out the test that the court did is new, which they essentially said now they've remanded it back to the district court to determine in a fact-finding session whether or not the behavior that led to these charges was an official act or not official act. If it's an official act, it's covered by immunity. If it's not an official act that led to these charges, then these acts would not be immune. So and they spell out a test that it doesn't apply to things that happened before or after the presidency, only while you're in office. So I think they did the very best they can on a fairly novel question of law. 232 years after the Constitution was written to deal with it. But I don't see a connection, at least there's none that would be known that would have animated the shooter.
Okay. And then, given the fact that it is a 20-year-old who, grew up potentially being bullied and perhaps was a loner, we don't know, all the facts.
No.
But given that, what are your thoughts regarding some international nexus, the Chinese, the Iranians, the Russians?
We're still talking about those with Leo Aviar as well, aren't we?
Yeah, exactly.
What motivated him? Was he really alone? I mean, and one of these discussions have gone on for 65 years, even though the books have been closed about the Kennedy assassination.
Right.
All elements and just all the initial reports, the shots came from someone's spot. So the police are going to continue to do a full and deeper dive. They've already done a search warrant on his home. There may be other information forthcoming, but I think at this point, it certainly seems to be active, sort of the typical profile you've been in law enforcement, sort of the lone wolf shooter. That seems to be the profile. More to come. But I think the broader point here is how do we resolve our problems in society? What happened to the ages of civility? I remember Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill disagreeing vehemently, having a beer at night, the two Irishmen coming out with a deal. Even Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton. I mean, that's the last time we balanced the budget. We performed welfare. The economy was a boom back in those times. They found ways to work together, but it's the last 20 years, my own theories about the things that have contributed to it, but the art of compromise seems to be lost. I think my partisan comment would be the Democratic Party over the last 10 years has gone very far left, so it's harder to find the middle. I mean, open borders and almost disdain for law enforcement or funding them, and this massive spending that's led to massive inflation, et cetera. The policies have changed. There's hardly any moderate Democrats seem like left. So it's harder to find the middle, but I think for the preservation of the Republic, we better have some statesmen rise up in the legislature and the executive branch and figure out how to get along as Americans.
They do. The other thing, and I know you've mentioned this in other discussions, other interviews, to serve in an elected capacity, the best people to fill those roles are those who don't necessarily seek those roles, or another way to say that is people who it is a call to duty, as opposed to seeking fame and fortune and popularity, right? The call to duty to serve, I think, is where we get our best political leaders from.
No, you're right. And that's why people that have been in, let's say, prior military roles, and we have fewer of them, I think is part of the problem, that really understand laying down your life for your friends, as Scripture says, the ultimate sign of love and fidelity. We have fewer of them, and I don't know, in the social media age, this certainly has not helped the situation. Everybody's a reporter. Nobody thinks there's any repercussions for saying whatever they want. So we have myriad things to address, but thank God that our founders, with all their flaws, many of them owning other people, which is not really comprehensible to me when you write words like all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights.
Yeah.
They were able to. They were so inspired by their study of Locke and Montesquieu and the Magna Carta and the understanding of democracy that they were able to put together this constitution that has made us the oldest continuous democracy now in the world, and the one that's emulated by other countries, and the one that people are willing to flee other countries and come here legally or illegally to be part of the American dream. I mean, it's stunning. We're still a great country, and but we have some serious challenges that require serious policymakers to work with people of all stripes, all parties, all races and creeds to get this job done.
Yeah, it's funny. We got to get to your origin story. We're moving along here, but during Hung Kao, when Hung was on, he talked about how he was quoting Ronald Reagan. How Ronald Reagan said, "You can move to France and you won't be French. You can move to Germany and you won't be German. But when you move to America, you're an American." And that's just really...
Well, it's the melting pot idea.
For sure, absolutely.
Out here, we'd all blend in and we'd accept some traditional norms that were foundational to this country. Some have said now we're a stew pot. We come here and nobody's melting. They're just becoming their own little stew. The carrots, the vegetables, the meat.
Yeah.
And that's, maintaining the roots is great. I'm Irish American. I just went to Ireland last year. I love it. Going back again next year. Love it. But at some point, there's something uniquely special about this country where people can come from all over the world, different religions,
for sure,
different traditions, different cultures, and realizing there's this fundamental idea of equality and fairness and the rule of law. Those things are why we're a great republic and why people try to emulate us. And we again, I pray for a new generation of statesmen and leaders that will say what George Washington said in his farewell address, that serving the people is more important than serving the political party. Washington warned us about the spirit of party and what would happen if the party became more important than policy and people. And I think we're kind of seeing his warnings played out.
That's a great quote, without a doubt. Okay, so let's go back in time a little bit. I want to talk about your childhood because I believe strongly that the seeds of our leadership are really planted and cultivated in our youth, and it really depends on parents, teachers, coaches, leaders that we're exposed to, good or not so good, depending on how you recall them. But where did you grow up, and what was your childhood like?
Well, again, I was very, very blessed, and this is an important question because of you see some of the social changes in our society in terms of the number of kids either born out of wedlock,
right?
Especially in inner cities, the number of
single parents,
single parents, and so whether single mom or dad, they're doing the best they can, but there's no better culture overall than the intact two-parent family to raise children. I think that's indisputable.
For sure.
All the literature. So I was very, very fortunate. My dad was a World War II vet. Taught me the traditions of. He was in the Army Air Corps during the war over in London, England for 2 years. My uncle was actually on the ground in Germany. So I learned from great people like that about patriotism and fidelity. My dad is the one that kind of talked me into going in ROTC when I went to Notre Dame, and that's kind of changed my life to be able to have military as my first career. My mom was largely a stay-at-home mom until I graduated, literally the year I graduated from college. And she had 4 more that were behind me. But I think she figured if she could train me, and that she could go back to work, work at Mount Vernon. So I've grown to love George Washington because of that, and she did too. But, I was very fortunate that I got to...
And you grew up in Fairfax?
I grew up in Fairfax, right near Mount Vernon, actually on the land. It was the South Farm of George Washington.
Wow.
And so, I had a great esteem for the founder of our country, indispensable leader of the revolution. I just think he set so many examples, including what I just told you about the warnings about party and about foreign entanglements and his belief in faith. It's impossible to govern without God and the Bible. And Washington had so many things that he wrote about that if we would study them and learn them, I think overall we'd be better. But anyway, I had just a great, Leave It to Beaver neighborhood, kind of an average middle class neighborhood. Again, my one parent.
Google that one, younger folks. Leave It to Beaver, very popular TV show in the 60s, I think it was.
But look, I got. My mom had my mom had the velvet hen, son of a pastor, just loving, angelic woman. And my dad was a tough guy, military guy, and I got the discipline with the belt when I needed it.
That's awesome.
Although I was always innocent, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Anyway, that combination, I think, served me well, and I've always remembered the lessons that both of them. They're both buried at Arlington. I see them.
Oh wow, that's incredible.
But I think of what they did in my life, and it makes me sad that people don't have that benefit. And
for sure,
we just got to do a better job caring for our kids and with the foster care crisis. And they age out with no loving family.
Yeah, well,
things happen. So
schools,
there's a lot there to unpack.
Yeah,
Bob, but this is the heart and soul of what our problems are. By the time people get to be 20 and decide that guns are fun and that's the way you resolve problems, it's almost too late.
Yeah, right. Did you play sports as a kid?
I did, of course. My parents encouraged me. So as a young kid, it was football, baseball, basketball. In high school, I ran track and played. And played football, and then even after that, the Army and at Notre Dame. Notre Dame at that point, you actually played tackle football in the intramural league. Most people weren't good enough to make the football team, but we played tackle.
That's pretty cool.
Now, I'm sure the insurance rates were as high as I fled. Anyway, I was always encouraged because you learn teamwork.
That's right.
When you're sports in the military, you learn teamwork. It's not about it's about we. You only win and lose as a team. And those are such critically important lessons for life, whether it's leadership or whether it's just being a good employee or being a good member of the church. These things are so important.
Yeah. Any sport. I've coached hockey for 12 years now and high school for the last 4 years. And
you still have all your teeth.
Well, I played just a couple days ago. We had a big game because I play in the adult leagues as well. And but I'm lucky. I believe me, there's a couple hits, pucks to the face. I thought, oh no,
here it comes.
Yeah, and luckily the teeth are still there. But to see these kids mature and develop and become responsible young men and women just through sports is something that is important. It's critical, and to any parents or future parents listening out there, have your son or daughter involved in sports and be involved. Volunteer, be a coach. Coaching my son throughout his entire childhood and into early adulthood, it created this additional special bond between us. We would drive to and from the rink 3 times a week, becoming masters of name that tune and classic rock and roll.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. It may be the to and from those sports that's as important or more important because it's quality time with mom.
It is, one-on-one.
And that means so much to these young people.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And then what about a high school job? What was your first job?
I was a busboy at the Officers Club at Fort Belvoir. And I had a paper route. The typical stuff that a young kid would do. The paper route, you learn. This is hard work. We're in the neighborhood, slapping the paper on the door, and then being a busboy. It's about the lowest thing you can possibly do in the food service business. But I was surrounded by a lot of these people were all military or military retirees, and they expected good service and polite. Yeah. And you couldn't be, goofing off and slopping food around and had to go down and some days wash dishes
for sure
downstairs. So I didn't start at the top. Never thought I'd be a governor or a political candidate or Army officer, but I learned some basic discipline that my parents reinforced at home. So I think your points about this. And even with families that may be broken through no fault of the kids, having a mentor in their life, people like the Boys and Girls Clubs and other community groups really recognize this, deficit. But if somebody who's a spiritual or a leadership mentor in a young person's life, if they don't have an intact family, it's just critically important for the well-being of that young person.
Yeah. We have a program here called Elevate Your Leadership. Called SeaTac SOARS. And of course, you're familiar with SeaTac Elementary School. Yeah. So we bring those kids here. We do a 13-week session before Christmas, 12 fifth graders, and then a new group of 12 for the 13 weeks after Christmas. And once a week, the bus drops them right at our front door at 3:30. And love it. And we feed them and we fly them. And we have guest speakers. And, you're welcome to come and be a guest speaker one day. Of course, I talk to them about ice hockey. And so it's a lot of fun. It's a give back, but it's mentorship. And pride and confidence was kind of why we put this program together. We wanted to demonstrate to these kids pride and confidence, and then ultimately inspire them to think differently, to think big and think outside the box. What's cool is, like, day one, the kids show up and some of them are like, I'm not sure if I'm going to do that. And folks, I'm talking about I Fly Virginia Beach and flying in our wind tunnel. And some of these kids are like,
that was my reaction this morning.
yeah. Still got to get the governor in there.
That's right.
But yeah, these kids are like, I'm not sure I'm going to do that. And by week 13, when all the parents show up and the school administrators, these kids are like, Mom, Dad, look at me. And so that kind of pride is really, really what we're looking for there.
Just to comment on that, my sport with my father helped coach the baseball team. I don't think he knew one end of the bat from the other, but he was there for me. And then when I was a young kid, he let me caddy for him, and then my treat was every once in a while I get to play golf with him. And I played Fort Belvoir and Andrews because he was a retired military guy. So it wasn't fancy courses. I don't remember much of my scores. I remember the last time we played, he was, I think, 85, 86, and the last hole he parred, and I bogeyed, which is classic. And, I'm 40-something.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget that he still beat me.
He got you.
The last hole that we played. What I remembered about him is he would tell me about sports, translating the lessons for life. He'd say, golf is like life. Sometimes you're in the fairway, beautifully teed up, short iron to the hole. Life is great. Sometimes you're in the woods. You got obstacles you got to navigate to get back in the fairway. And sometimes you hit the ball in the water. You got to take out a new ball and start all over. But I've always, and I tell people that all the time, because that's like life.
Yes, it is.
You smack down. It isn't fair all the time.
That's right.
Sometimes it's your fault. Sometimes it's somebody else's fault. Sometimes it's just that stuff happens.
Yeah.
But you got to persevere in life. Perseverance is such a critical virtue.
For sure.
Biblical virtue.
That's right.
It's one that everybody in the military understands from day one.
Yeah.
Or you drop out of boot camp, on day two.
Yeah.
You got to just get back up. You're going to get knocked down.
Yeah.
You can't. That's the way you become successful in life.
Yeah, for sure.
Nobody hands it to you. You have to earn it.
You have to earn it. And one way to get back up, and it's something I really pay attention to with my teammates here, is if their intent is well placed, when they get knocked down, when something doesn't go right, I'm there to help pick them up, dust them off, and move them in the right direction. Like
I need that encouragement, empathy.
Yeah. What I've seen in the private sector, contrasting my 26 years in the military, where somebody's always there to pick you up and dust you off. In the private sector, when I first entered the private sector, I think people are afraid to take risks because they're afraid of getting fired or otherwise being alienated. And so that was kind of an eye-opener for me as I made the transition. But
risk is part of the success.
Yeah, exactly.
Calculated.
Yeah.
Risk, not wild risk, but that's the spirit. That's why you built this place.
That's right.
Entrepreneurship. No pain, no gain is the old way you used to say.
Oh, that's a fact. That's no risk, no reward.
And I'm sure when you started, you only worked 2 hours a week and let everybody do everything.
Exactly. So really, really enjoyed that story, especially about the time with your father there. Moving on into early adulthood, it seems to me that you got involved in politics at a relatively young age. Can you tell us how you decided to do that and why, when and why?
My parents were both politically active. They were both Democrats, Kennedy Democrats. My mom literally left a little farm in Texas when she was 19 to move to Washington to work for Congressman Olin B. Tiger T. And that was a big experience for her. She did a good job. That's how she met my father at an event at Bowling Air Force Base right outside of D.C.
Yeah.
And they dated, and the rest is history, as we say. But I was just very fortunate to have those two together. So then my dad was in the military. So what I learned was about service.
Mm-hmm.
And sacrifice from those two. Although my dad being part of the greatest generation, they didn't talk about the war. He was there for 3 years with the 306 bomb group in Third Line, England, and told me very few of those stories. Most of them didn't talk about it. That was just their duty to brag about it.
Yeah.
But my dad kind of pushed me, and I wouldn't have probably done this without him, but to go into Army, ROTC. I had a scholarship to Notre Dame, so my first years out of college, I had a job. And I'll never forget, the first thing I did, I was in Germany, Grafenwehr, Germany, right near the Iron Curtain at that time. Again, for young people, that was what happened with the Soviet Union having the eastern part of the bloc.
Right.
Split up. Anyway, so I got to be more, patriotic. I got to understand the price of freedom. I got to understand the difference between tyranny in East Germany and freedom in West Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And so Then I went into business for a while, but it wasn't really until I came back here to Virginia Beach, went to law school, and got a master's in government at Regent University, and I did an internship on Capitol Hill, and I started to write and read more about the American experiment, and I thought, boy, this is really an amazing country, and I'd love to be a part of it, to serve in some way, to make sure we have the policies that the American dream and the American experiment and the American exceptionalism could continue. So really, it wasn't really much as a kid other than watching my parents. It was 1988 doing that internship on Capitol Hill that made me think for Congressman Jerry Lewis of California, who was one of the leaders of the House Republican Caucus chairman. I thought, I think I could do this. I want to look into it.
Okay. And then your first elected office was with the Virginia State Legislature. Is that correct?
House of Delegates. Ran 2 years after I graduated from law school. I was a little older because of the military and the business. I was 37 in 1991, got elected, surprised everybody, including me, that I got elected. But you know what? I just knocked on doors. I didn't have money. I had a little political experience. I had a lot of friends and a lot of volunteers. We just knocked on doors and outworked a 20-year incumbent. And, here I am, which is a good lesson for everybody. It's everybody thinks, you got to have money, you got to have name ID. Those things help. Yeah. But hard work and good ideas and perseverance and just, a lot of people around you who are willing to donate a little time. Yeah. Or especially for a city council or a state legislative race, we don't have that many voters in the district. Yeah. I mean, you don't have democracy. You can win. Yeah. You don't have the party, you don't have the party money showing up and they look at the demographic, that guy's not going to win. Yeah. But I did. It's funny because George Bush said the same thing. When he decided he wanted to get into politics, I can't remember if I read this or it was an interview or whatever, but they told him, that's a stupid idea. You'll never win. Baseball team owner with a DUI. That's not a good resume. Yeah, right. There it is. Right. And in two-term governor before that, that didn't hurt. Yeah, that doesn't hurt. Yeah, that's a good launching pad. So interesting. So you served quite a while. Were you in House of Delegates the whole time, or were you ever? I was in the House of Delegates for 14 years, 70 terms. My last couple of years, I served as the assistant majority leader. But then I ran for attorney general in 2005 and won. And I believe it was the closest statewide election in history. I won after a 7-week recount by 360 votes out of a million cast. Wow. So I was very fortunate to win that election. And then in 2009, I ran again, ironically, against the same guy. Oh, no kidding. Senator Creed Deeds for governor, and won in the largest margin in history. Yeah, that's incredible. By 18 points. So it was just different political years. Virginia's got something called the curse. The party in power in the White House always loses the governor's race. 50 years it's been true, except for one campaign. Okay, wow. So, I mean, when President Obama got elected, of course, I wanted our candidate to win, but it certainly created the atmosphere to be able to people in Virginia look the other way. Okay. What about when you were Attorney General? Can you share with us kind of one of the most memorable or most historic or most difficult, what challenged you as a leader the most during your time as Attorney General? Well, there were many, because you're making big decisions all the time. You're writing opinions that hopefully will resolve matters for the public. I think it was the Virginia Tech shooting. Oh, wow. Back in 2007. And Governor Kane was actually on a flight to Japan on an economic development mission when the shooting started. It was 9:30 that morning on April 16th, and I got the call from the state police. Mm-hmm. And then a second call that we really knew this was, catastrophic. So I was the one, in those early hours in the first 2 days, actually, that had to handle almost all the press inquiries. I went there and toured Norris Hall, which was just etched in my mind walking through the place. Yeah. People were, the students had been slaughtered. I had a niece and a nephew there at the time, and, for the first hours, nobody knows anything. Cell phones weren't then what they are now. That was really, really difficult. I think that was Tim Kaine's finest hour when he came back exhausted and he and George Bush gave brilliant speeches to lift up the community for answers after that horrific event. And then we spent hallmark of leadership. It really is. The next year we spent a lot of time with the victims. Governor Kane did a great job meeting with the families. We closed the gun show loophole. Not the gun show. one of the barriers to being able to purchase a weapon is if you would be disqualified if you had inpatient treatment for a mental health problem and had been declared incompetent. But if you had outpatient treatment, you weren't. And that's what happened with the shooter in that case. And there's no difference. It's just how you get the treatment.
Right.
But if you're still declared incompetent, this is a real problem.
Yeah.
So we closed that right away. We found ways to work together across the party lines. We handled 32 lawsuits and settled all but 2 of them.
Wow.
So it was one of those things that taught me so much about, I was Tim Kaine's lawyer. He was a Democrat. I was a Republican. But I told him, look, my job is to be a good lawyer for you, run a good office.
Right.
And, we got to work together. And we did pretty well during those hours. But particularly during that event, we put all the partisanship aside and try to take care of the victims and solve problems. I thought that was a pretty good model for how people ought to govern.
Good. That's incredible. Then moving on to Governor, you went directly from the Attorney General seat to becoming the 71st Governor of the state of Virginia, right? And while you were governor, I'm going to ask you the same question. What was kind of the most challenging and or memorable thing or situation that you dealt with? But aside from the legal trouble that presented itself towards the end, because that's probably the most challenging thing that you had. But aside from that, what was something during legislation you signed, or a dispute you resolved, or what was a memorable accomplishment, I guess, in lesson in leadership?
When you're governor, you're a general manager, and I called them my 12 apostles, my 12 members of the cabinet. You got to train people that you trust.
Yeah,
you go out, you give them authority, responsibility, hold them accountable, and let them go do their job. But I mean, every year you get about 900 bills that come to your desk, and you got 30 days to figure out what to do with them. So you're always moving at warp speed. You got to make decisions kind of quickly but thoughtfully, and then don't look back because you don't have time. Making decisions on executions is tough. We had 3 executions, and the last thing you'd get is a call from the prison that says, "Governor, is there any reason that this person should not be executed?" That's tough.
Yeah, right.
And I had reviewed all those cases pretty carefully.
Right.
Let them all go forward. Those are tough. There were, the natural disasters when you're looking at somebody who's, a loved one just died in a tornado. We had several of those.
Okay.
Or hurricane. I mean, those are tough. The one that was the most memorable for me really was my last year. I went to Afghanistan because we had a Virginia unit in Kandahar. So I went to Kandahar and Kabul with the governor of Montana.
Okay.
He had units over there too. And before that, we went to Kuwait and Walter Reed. So we got to see people, and then we went to Landstuhl Hospital on the way out. But to be able to see these warriors, in a very dangerous situation, to be able to speak to our National Guard, because you're the commander of the National Guard,
right?
The governor,
right?
And same with the governor of Montana. And I mean, that was incredibly memorable. Just to say a word to them, they're gone for a year, and encourage them and maybe inspire them with some way about what they're doing for the people of Virginia, that they're not forgotten, that the mission's important. And then to go to the hospitals at Walter Reed and Landstuhl and be able to see these warriors that were, shot up or
blown up,
an IED, and you just want to cry.
Yeah.
In what they sacrificed to their country, and thinking, how do I get these other 8.5 million people in Virginia to understand what some people are doing for you?
Yeah.
Because then you'd vote and you wouldn't take your freedoms for granted. And so that really inspired me a lot, and I think made me a more effective governor after that.
Wow. Folks, we're going to take a quick break for capitalism. We are a capitalist country, and quick time out to pay some bills, and we will be right back. I want to take a minute to tell you about my book titled Elevate Your Leadership: How to Develop, Maintain, and Advance Lifelong Leadership. This book is based on my 26 years in U.S. Navy Special Operations and now 13 years in the private sector. Leadership is a perishable skill and a personal brand. In Part 1, I guide you through building and applying your personal brand of leadership. Leadership also requires physical energy and mental clarity. In Part 2, I go over the 6 key components of health and wellness and how you can apply these components every single day to become a great leader. This book is also breathable. What does that mean? It's 170 pages, 12-point font, with charts and graphs and pictures to break up the monotony of reading page after page. Finally, this book is available on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and of course, RobertPizzini.com. Folks, I want to take a minute and talk about Breeden Construction. Breeden Construction built iFly Virginia Beach 10 years ago, and our building is solid. Why? Building a standard. Our standard is excellence. Visionary thinking, innovative design, dynamic solutions, and transformative growth. While others may see lofty ideals, we see the very foundation needed to construct a better future. This isn't just a promise we make to you, it's the standard we uphold. This is Breeden Construction. Learn more at breedenconstruction.com. Headquartered in Virginia with offices throughout Virginia and North Carolina, you can contact Breeden Construction directly at area code 804-364-4600. Breeden Construction, a national general contractor. And we are back. We're talking to Governor Bob McDonnell, the 71st governor of the state of Virginia. And fascinating discussion, especially in view of the political picture today. We talked about the attempted assassination and some other things on the national level. And kind of staying at the national level, a friend of mine and a friend of yours, Hung Kao, is running for the U.S. Senate. And I know you endorsed Hung, and your endorsement was, I thought, quite impressive. It was a detailed, very personal endorsement delivered with passion. And Hung, again, I'm 100% biased in my discussion with Hung Kao because I served with him. I served with him in Iraq. I was one of his instructors at Navy Dive School. I made him do push-ups until I got tired of watching him do push-ups.
He got tired before he did.
That's right. That's exactly right. So, I ran out of water. I was sitting down watching him, and my water ran out. So,
Well, you pay your dues.
Yeah. Yeah. But what do you make, first of all, of the Senate race in the state of Virginia? We just talked about Tim Kaine, who Hung will be running against. So we'll start there. What do you make of that Senate race?
Well, I try to be honest about these things. I was Tim Kaine's lawyer for 4 years, and we had a good relationship. We disagreed often, but we did it respectfully, civilly. I knew my role as his attorney general. And just looking back at his prior service, missionary to Honduras and city council and mayor of Richmond, I thought at that point he was civil. He was a gentleman. We had a good working relationship. I think his voting record in the United States Senate has been increasingly bad for all the obvious reason on borders, on inflation, on values issues, on so many things. I feel like he's voting for things that are not helpful long term for the people of Virginia, for our culture, for our leadership role in the world as Americans. So I've endorsed Hung Kao. Doesn't mean I'm not still friends with Tim Kaine.
Sure.
His family.
Yeah, we're adults. You guys we're acting like adults.
Yeah, but I like Hung Kao's story. I mean, we need more people that really do understand why we're a great country, but are not going to fib out the flaws of the country and what we need to do to become a more perfect union. That's what our founders wrote in the preamble of the Constitution.
Yeah.
But he's got a great American dream story, leaving Vietnam as a young guy refugee. Coming here, going to the Naval Academy, becoming a citizen, 25 years in the Navy, multiple deployments, dangerous jobs. And, I know served with you and dangerous EOD rules. I mean, that's the zero mistake rule.
Right.
There ever was one.
Right. We have a saying in EOD, it's called initial success or total failure.
Yeah. I mean, there's black and white.
Yeah.
I wish there were more things black and white. We live in this area of gray. But any event, so I like his story. He's energetic. He's thoughtful. I think he's principally conservative, father of 5. I think he's got a lot of the experience, as you pointed out earlier. Experience does matter in a dangerous world and a domestic economy that needs a lot of help. So I like him. I think he would serve well, and I look at him as a younger generation of leaders that understand the price of freedom, but also will grow up to be statesmen. I think you pointed out earlier, just because, and Reagan said this so well, if you disagree with me, you're still an American. You're not my enemy. You're still an American, and let's reason together. That's what the scriptures say. Come, let us reason together.
Right.
That's why God gave us these brains. If you don't agree with me, that doesn't mean I'm 100% right all the time. Remember the book? Jim Baker wrote this book that got some traction a while back, said the other fellow may be right.
Ah, wow. The former Secretary of the Treasury, Jim Baker. Yeah. Okay.
How about that? The other fellow may be. So you ought to listen. God gave you 2 ears, 1 mouth. Listen twice as much as you talk.
Yeah.
Anyway, there are a bunch of trite sayings to do that. But I think we're in an age that people like Hung Kao, that I think because of his own journey to get here,
right,
through the military and through leaving a communist country, he's the kind of leader that'll make a difference.
Yeah. Great candidate, somebody who truly appreciates the freedoms of America, the American dream, the ability to serve. He's got a fantastic book. It's called Call Me an American.
Yeah.
And he talks about his journey from Vietnam, and he talks a lot of about a lot of his political views, but every view he has is hinged on an experience, his historical experiences, and they're real, and there's depth to them. And he just does such a good job of bringing that out. Growing up in Northern Virginia, he was a student at Thomas Jefferson High School, where
top high school in the country.
Right. Where now they're kind of woke and other things that are really destroying the academics of a place that built men like Hung Kao, or contributed to his upbringing and his education and his moral and ethical character at the end of the day. So, but now we are on the eve of the convention. It actually starts tonight, and hopefully we're going to see Hung on stage speaking, representing his candidacy, representing the state of Virginia, and representing, obviously, the candidacy of former President Trump. So that's great.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I got to speak in 2012.
Really?
On the Tuesday night prime time, and it's a very memorable experience. My daughter got to speak. She's an Iraq War veteran, and she got to speak early in that evening. But it's an exciting couple of minutes.
Well, let me ask you about that. Were you on the short list for vice president during that time?
I won't say the short list. My name was floated about in different circles, but I don't think I was seriously considered by Mitt Romney, but I was flattered to be.
Okay.
Bantered about.
Okay. You didn't fill out the application, so to speak.
No. And that's okay. I was happy being governor of Virginia.
Sure.
I think there might have been something else I might have been able to do had Governor Romney got elected, because I had great respect for him.
For sure.
Very principled man.
Yeah.
Strong businessman. I think he'd have done well for the country.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we have a strong businessman as the governor now, Governor Youngkin, and his name has been floated as well. We hear the same 4 or 5 names for a potential vice presidential candidate with Donald Trump. Youngkin's not mentioned nearly as much as these, the 4 or 5 others, but. Any thoughts there? Do you think Youngkin might be the guy?
I think the world of Glenn Youngkin. I didn't know him really until he became a candidate, but I am incredibly impressed with the kind of administration that he's running. First of all, he's brilliant. Harvard MBA. He ran a large private equity company for a very long time, and that is not an easy business. You got to be very decisive to do well. And he had a lot of wins there. But just looking at and he's a person of deep faith. I think he's really a person of principle. He's reached out to the other side. It's been hard. It's a toxic environment, unfortunately, more so now in Richmond. Like the Washington, the swamp. The swamp is filtered down to Richmond. But what I see is on the stuff that matters to citizens, like cutting down permit times and increasing, reducing the wait time at DMV.
Oh, huge.
All of that stuff. Yeah. People really want. Government's running very, very well, and at the macro level on various policies, I think he's stood strong on everything from cutting taxes and regulation to being resolute and tough on criminal justice, to so many areas. He's put forth things that work. Now the economy's been pretty good. He's had a lot of surpluses in his budget. I think I got a little return. Hope everybody is happy. But he's put money into the rainy day fund, I think, to really bolster the finances. Just a couple of days ago, CNBC says Virginia's back to the top spot. It's the most business-friendly state in the country. Wow. So there's plenty of bona fides for Glenn Youngkin. And he lives in a swing state. Let's face it, Virginia's in play. So that's another one of the many factors that are present, I just would say with President Trump, he's played it close to the vest.
Yeah.
He teases this, teases that, but ultimately, probably only he knows what he's going to do.
Yeah.
We may get it today.
Yeah, right. But those last couple of things you said there, I think, are the most relative. Virginia's a swing state. It's swinging conservative. Obviously, we have a Republican governor. And how many electoral votes is Virginia? 13. Okay, so that's noteworthy.
Right.
I mean, that's worth a look, and that's worth the effort. And
we're the 8th or 9th largest, because obviously it goes by population. You got Florida, California,
right.
Florida, the big ones.
Yeah.
But we're nearly 9 million people. I think we're the 12th most populous state.
Yeah, it's worth the effort for sure. And the last polling I saw is Virginia's kind of a draw right now.
Right. And I remember Biden won by 9 or 10, I think.
Right.
For him.
Right. Kind of
in Virginia. So to be at a draw at this point, I think is pretty good. But the intensity level on all these swing states where that Biden won last time, that's a really critical factor at this juncture of the election. I mean, we're 65 days from early voting.
Yeah.
Beginning. It's hard to believe that, and we're not even sure who the Democratic nominees.
Yeah.
I mean, I think. So to see almost all these swing states either being even or plus Trump by a couple points, states that he lost before, I think it's a pretty good indicator that there's been a swing. President Biden's got a 36% approval rate. That's not very good for an incumbent president,
right.
90 days, 100 days out. So I think there's a real chance for the Republicans to win this time.
Yeah, wow. Going to kind of the local level here in Virginia Beach, we're residents of Virginia Beach. We had within the city council a collective bargaining vote a couple months ago now. And my understanding was this was enabled due to legislation that Governor Northam signed, which opened the door, somehow legally created this ability for collective bargaining within our civil organizations, fire department, police department, et cetera. Anyway, thoughts, observations, or opinions on collective bargaining as it applies to, number one, Virginia Beach, and number two, the state of Virginia?
Well, as you know, good management and good leadership generally is the best hedge against unionization of your people because, all the obvious reasons. But I think collective bargaining was on the. I think the bill basically required localities to take a vote up or down, or leave it up to the locality. So that's good in that so far.
Yeah.
And by a date certain, and that's why Virginia Beach just voted and it failed on a 5-5 vote. So obviously, and then one person who I think is a former union member actually recused himself, which I think is probably right. But, I think there's been a rise in unionization recently around the country. And let's face it, part of what they do, and again, this may sound overly partisan, but the unions overwhelmingly face Democrat candidates. So the Democrats want to have more unions, so they have more union dues, so they can contribute more to Democratic candidates. You know how that seems to work. And but I think it long term, there may be some contractual gains that can be made, but long term, what it does is we're still paying all those union dues. There's no free lunches here. Corporations build the cost of doing business, including all of the benefits they have to give unions, price increases, inflation, all of those things get built into the cost of goods. So ultimately, the rest of this community, Americans, Virginians, are paying for all of those benefits and all of those things that go into it. So I've felt like, for the most part, there was a time in America where unions, particularly the 1800s,
totally agree.
Resolution,
right?
A lot of people were just not treating workers that well. But the best and smartest employers, especially with the 3% unemployment rate, you got to take care of your people. They're going to go next door. People can vote with their pocketbook.
Yep.
And that's always been the freedom of the market with the employer. If you don't like your employer, then go find an employer
for sure.
More money. Go back to school and improve your skills. That's the way. I think that's the great part of the American capitalist system.
Yeah.
And so I don't like a mandate that you have to collectively bargain for every contract, every wage, every benefit. Let the elected officials do what they're supposed to do, and if you don't like them, vote them out.
That's right.
And some people agree with you. That's the way it works.
Yeah. So leadership,
Yeah.
You just really described the requirement, and the requirement is leadership that's effective, that's aggressive, that takes ownership.
Take care of your people.
Yeah.
Know that as a military guy, you don't take care of your people. I don't care what you got on your collar. They're not going to charge that hill. They're not going to sacrifice their life for you.
That's right.
Maybe for their country.
That's right.
You inspire them.
Yeah.
And you demonstrate. You demonstrate leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. And they can get you fired. I talk about it in my book a little bit, but your people can get you fired if you're not leading in the proper capacity. And
all right, shameless plug. Elevate your leadership. Can't wait to read it. I know, but you are right on when it comes to leaders setting the culture.
Yeah,
inspiring people with humility and tenacity.
Yeah,
but taking care of yourself.
Yeah,
and I think you're one of the few that have written about the importance of leaders taking care of themselves with hydration, nutrition, sleep, stress relief, exercise.
Yeah.
If you're a better machine, you're going to be a better leader.
That's it.
You're going to have the fortitude. You're not going to lose your cool. You're not going to say the things you wish you could take back.
Exactly.
All those
exactly. Say or do something.
Leaders would.
Do something you wish you wouldn't have done.
All of that. So anyway, this is a good read.
Yeah. No, thank you. I greatly appreciate that. So one of my sayings or slogans, and I don't know if I heard this somewhere or if I came up with it, but it's if you take care of your team, they will take care of your dream.
And love it.
Yeah. In the private, in entrepreneurship, my dream obviously is running this business effectively and being profitable, but also, nurturing and taking care of everybody on this team in the process. And for me, a big part of leadership is help. Well, it's the way I define it in my book. I define it in 2 words, which is enabling others.
No, exactly.
Yeah, and the longer
it's not about you.
Right.
It's about getting them, because if they achieve their dreams and goals, you're going to achieve yours.
That's it.
That's exactly.
Yeah, that's it. So now that I gave away kind of my 2-word definition, how would you
define it anyway?
Yeah. How do you define the word and apply? How do you define the word leadership?
Yeah, I think you're right on the track. Leadership is motivating a person or an entity to do things that you'd like them to do, but it also benefits them.
Yeah.
Leadership set culture. When I was governor, I had 120,000 people that worked state government. I try to shake as many hands and know their story, but I couldn't touch it. So we got to set a culture of excellence, a culture of civility, a culture of taking care of your remaining, whether it's a squad in the Navy or whether it's 120,000 people working for state government. The same principles really apply. Let me give you a couple of these pithy quotes, and the reason pithy and they work, and they've been around for a while. So, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Right.
I think Frank Luntz, the great pollster from Fox News, I hear him saying that all the time. It's not what you say, it's what people hear. So tone
for sure
matters. And so, I could go down the list, but people like Ronald Reagan, Teddy Roosevelt, and many others have said, it's amazing how much you can get done when you don't care who gets the credit. So there's a real fundamental principle here. And I don't want to be too philosophical, but I will.
Oh, please do.
So the scriptures, Jesus said this really important thing about greatness. He said that if you want to be great, you must you have to humble yourself. And he's got several parables in the book of Matthew that talk about that. And ironically, it's the same thing that the great management guru Jim Collins wrote about in the movie Good to Great. I think you're a student.
I've got the book on the shelf right there.
So, you know about Collins.
Absolutely.
So I had Collins come and speak to my cabinet about a couple of months after I got elected, because I read the book, and he decides that, Jesus was right, which was servant leadership is the way. He said the great X factor, the top 3 or 4% of all American business. He studied 1,500 corporations. Why are the ones that have the greatest retention, the greatest value, appreciation of their stock prices, the greatest innovation, etc. Why are they great? What is it about the leaders? And that's what he said. He said the X factor was humility. It's aggressiveness and energy and passion for the customer, for the employee, for the shareholder. It's not about you.
Exactly.
He has this beautiful description. He says when it comes to assigning blame, you look in the mirror. And when it says to assigning credit, you look at the window of all the people out there that make it the way it is. And so all these principles, and I know you know that as a leader and an author and a student, the subject is people are not people are not going to take the hill for you and take that first hill until they realize that there's something that
you're going to do it for them.
You're doing it for them, or they're doing it for their country. You have to be other focused. It's about others. Part of the golden rule, that's made America great is service to others. Anyway, I could go on, but I think the principles are all the same, and that's what works.
Well, and one of the other ones, I don't know where I heard it, but the more you give, the more you get. So much truth to that. I actually talk about Collins a little bit in the book, and you'll appreciate this being a military guy. He has the 5 levels of leadership. And I overlay
the level 5 leader is the it's the one with the X factor.
The executive but I overlaid his 5 levels of leadership against the 3 levels of warfare, from the ground up: tactical, operational, and strategic. And in the book, I make the comparison that Collins' level 1 and level 2 is really the tactical level, in military terms, but the tactical level people in my business are my customer-facing employees. So that's level 1, level 2. They deliver the product or service, and they interact directly with the customers all the time. And then level 3, vice president, operational manager, that's the operational level in the military. Those are the people who enable the tactical people to do their job. They give them direction. They give them resources. They give them training. They provide everything that's necessary for the tactical level people to do their job. So tactical, operational, Collins, that's level 1, level 2, level 3, and then level 4, level 5 is executive in Collins' model. And that's strategic in the military model. That's your president, vice president. That's your very high-level decision makers. They're not in the weeds, tactically speaking, but they're enabling the entire process, and they provide the North Star. We're all moving in this direction. We're going after this objective. That's visionary leadership as well. You have to, number 1, have a vision, and number 2, communicate that vision every single day to keep everybody moving in the same direction. So
that's well said. And you've got 40 employees?
40, yeah.
And so I think the principle, whether you're 40 or the 100, you want not just your top level people, but everyone throughout the organization to understand what the goals are and then how those relate to their job. Because if your job is so amorphous, you can't possibly figure out how it's going to improve the brand, make the customer happy, drop more money to the bottom line. I think that's the challenge in the organization, is get them a piece of ownership in whatever the vision is of the leader. And it's hard to do, but if you do it and you set that culture right to exactly the way you've described it, that's success.
So what's the difference? A couple of really detailed questions that only somebody with your experience could answer at this point. What's the difference between leading, I've got 40 people here, versus the 120,000 you just mentioned? I know everybody on a first name basis. I can be very personal, and I can get to know them, at the level that you alluded to earlier. But what's the difference, or is there a difference between 40 and 400 or 120,000?
I think the principles are the same, but the way you have to communicate it is different, because there's no way. I walked around a lot in the state buildings, and I'd give remarks to people. A couple times I did, like the Zoom. Well, Zoom wasn't around then. That kind of call where people could get on the phone. But for the top leaders, if I could convince them and get their buy-in on the goals, and get them to a standard of excellence, and then ask them to communicate it down the levels, down to the brand new person working in the mailroom.
Right.
Then that would be successful.
Okay.
And so we had 135 agency heads and about 15 to 18 cabinet and senior staff people. And this was the key. So when I had Collins come, I had a retreat at the University of Richmond. I had him speak to all those 150 people.
Okay.
To try to get their buy-in.
Okay.
And I think we were reasonably successful, and I stayed in touch with those top leadership people regularly. We'd have dinners, and we'd have receptions and different things like that to bring different people in time to reinforce those ideas and create this culture of excellence. So if it didn't matter if those 120,000 people, Republicans or Democrats, they were civil servants, and they were all critical to the success of our administration as to whether or not the average Virginia citizen would feel good walking into DMV or walking into the ABC store or whatever, like they were treated with respect. That's what we wanted.
Right.
So it's harder, but the presidents are still the same. It's just there's many tiers to get to.
Sure.
To be able to get to the bottom. I just saw a couple things that were really corny. It's back to they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
So, Valentine's Day, both in the Attorney General's office and the Governor's office, me and my chief of staff would be literally standing at the elevators where everybody had to go with hot chocolate and marshmallows with hearts in it.
Nice.
Hey, man, I care about you. Have some hot chocolate. Thanks for doing a good job. It was that simple. But, it was a sign. And I'd write, when especially Attorney General, I only had 400 people. So every birthday, every major event that I knew about, a wedding or whatever, I had them a note or sent them a voice.
That's incredible.
So it's just the little stuff. But little stuff matters.
Oh, it matters. It matters big time. So this is one of the reasons I love doing this podcast so much because, like you said earlier, it's not what you said, it's what the person heard.
Yeah.
And what I heard you say is you have direct influence over your key personnel. You interact with them regularly, making sure they understand your message and your direction and your vision. And then they take that message down. So it just kind of rolls down the chain of command, if you will.
That's the goal.
Keep everybody...
But you have to back it up. Like we did some performance bonuses for people, and I want to make sure state employees knew that we were going to pay for performance and excellence.
Okay, good.
Expanded the benefits. So you have to back it up with tangible action that everybody sees it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not exactly show me the money, but show me something you're doing for your state.
Yeah. But then presence. Then you got in front of your 120,000 people in some capacity
as much as
you can.
But touch. Yeah. Probably, maybe 5,000.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's just hard to touch.
But whether you're leading 40 people or 400 people, you have to, as a leader, recognize your inner circle and make sure that you are influencing them effectively and then empower them to go do.
Key word, empower.
Yeah.
Don't micromanage.
Yeah.
You're going to measure by success or failure by the task you've given them. But if you have to you tell them generally what the mission is and what the goal is. But if you have to tell them how to do it, then one of you is not needed. So they have the expertise.
For sure.
Probably know more about that. So you hire the right people.
Yeah.
You equip them and empower them. I love that, which means you give them the support, tangible support that they need, the decision-making authority.
Right.
But you also bring in the accountability. You figure out how to get it done, but this is what I need you to do.
Yeah. Love that. We talked about a lot of very interesting things, and the convention's going to happen starting tonight and throughout the week, and next week we could probably have another very fascinating discussion based on the political things that are going to happen over the next week or so. But what haven't I asked you? What do you think would be relevant in terms of leadership, or something personal, or something that you would like people to know at this stage in your life? I take it politics is behind you now. Seeking elected office, certainly people seek your guidance all the time, I would imagine. But what haven't I asked you?
Well, Bob, it's been a real treat to be on and talk about these critically important issues. I think leadership at every level has throughout history been why America is a great country, and not just in government and business, but in our charitable organizations. That's really why de Tocqueville said why we're a great country. America's great because America's good, and we see the goodness of the people and the fact that they volunteer. Even with all the problems we have in America, Republicans, Democrats, black, white, brown, doesn't matter. We're the most generous country on earth in terms of giving time, talent, treasure, foreign aid to other people. Most people we don't even know, and it's driven so much by the time we give. Time can't be replicated. You make more money, can't make more time. So that's still kind of the heart and soul of the greatness of our country. We need to talk about that more, about volunteering. I love what you said, which is right out of the scriptures, give and it shall be given unto you, pressed down, good measure, running over, the words of Jesus. But given it shall be, and you'll get more in return. I mean, that's just the way God made us. The other thing I did that was kind of corny, but people need tangible reminders of the message. So I'm a Notre Dame grad, and so Notre Dame, the football players come out the tunnel and they touch this sign that says "Play like a champion today." I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And then beat Navy, of course. But I changed that to serve like a champion today. And I made these signs and I gave it to all my cabinet, all those agency heads, these 150 people who were going to determine how the government was managed. And I signed a little note to it on the bottom. And they put it in their office. I wanted them to remember every day, serve. It's not about you. It's about the 8 million people of Blessed Virginia. How? With excellence, like a champion. That's how I want you to serve. And I got 4 years to govern. You cannot wait. You cannot put things off. You cannot procrastinate. You need to do it today.
Yeah.
So I figured that was kind of a tangible reminder about excellence. So let me just close, I guess, with this is I think every citizen has a role in what kind of country we have. Mm-hmm. And it's not just about voting, but it's about what kind of person are you? Are you going to contribute to the problems of the country and be more divisive in the way you act? Or are you going to contribute to what's always been good and great about our country, treating other people with respect, be humble, be civil? Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean don't be passionate and fight like heck for your ideas. But if the other guy disagrees with you, he's not, fill in the blank with all, the line of bad things you could say. But
right.
You don't have to do that.
Right.
That's not the way Washington governed, Reagan, Bill Clinton.
Right.
They were very effective in bringing people together.
Yeah.
Across the aisle to be able to get stuff done. So we all own the government. I mean, that's what people forget. We're the owners of the government,
right.
Not the politician. They just rent the seat,
right,
for as long as you're going to give it.
Right. Right.
And I think going back to the first principles, I love reading the founders. Washington, they wanted to be king. He said, heck no, we just got rid of another George we didn't like for lording it over to us. And I'm not going to do it. And he gave us these clarion warnings about the excesses of political party. He was the only independent president we ever had. He was very forced a critical role of faith. And I think, we're down to less than half the people said they go to church anymore. Precipitous decline from 70 years ago.
Yeah.
And so if you don't have something to give you an uplifting, positive value set, your decisions may not be as good as they should. Mm-hmm. And you don't have anywhere to go in troubled times. So people resort to violence because they're lonely and broken and discarded or bullied. Maybe the profile here that we saw in the Trump shooting. So we just gotta be good neighbors.
Yeah.
It's the golden rule. I mean, if we could do one thing.
Yeah.
In a society that everybody could own, they would do unto others as you'd like them to do unto you. I mean,
simple,
the cardinal golden rule of American society. All the great religions, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, all have a principle that embraces that. So I hope that's something we can all agree on, and we can all do our part to keep the great country strong.
Well, that's positive, and that's a very positive and uplifting way to end the discussion. And I don't think there's any better way to end the discussion than in a positive and uplifting way. Yeah, Governor Bob McDonnell, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you sharing your time and your wisdom and your knowledge. You're being very giving by being here today, and I know you brought great value to the people who will listen to this podcast, and I can't thank you enough.
Well, I love what you're doing. You're an entrepreneur. You've taken risks, and now you've given 40 families a living. And I hope you continue to grow, and especially teaching people about leadership with your military and business experience. There's no more necessary trait at this sort of divisive time in America than to have calm leaders being able to tell people and inspire people how to lead good lives and keep our nation strong. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for listening to the Elevate Your Leadership podcast. To contact Bob directly or to learn more about how Bob can advance you and your organization through leadership training, team building, executive coaching, and public speaking, visit robertpizzini.com. Robert, Pizzini.com, and connect with him on LinkedIn.